No beginning without courage. No courage without truth. The source of true courage is an experience which brings past and future together. For the future is not restricted to time. From the life between death and a new birth, we bring into the earthly life ahead the impulse to correct the consequences of our deeds in a previous earthly life. This thought from the past is linked to a thought of the future. The fruits of a former life are incorporated into the spiritual germ of the human being, ripen in the life between death and rebirth, and then transformed into talents and abilities, appear in a new life. Upon comprehending these two thoughts, the present becomes a moment of courage. Such courage, practiced in the inner life of soul and exercised in the outer events of destiny, leads the soul to experience immortality. It is the trustworthy consciousness of the fact that the power is garnered in a former life to confront the individual with the events occurring in the destinies of a later life. This courage becomes the redeemer from the fallibility of the death-ridden body. But in the meetings of those with whom we are connected by destiny, it is also, as the bearer of the consciousness of this immortality, it becomes the awakener of the consciousness within them. Courage thus becomes power of redemption. A meditation that strengthens this redemptive power is the contemplation of destiny as a consequence of self-inflicted events. From the book, The Virtues, Seasons of the Soul by Herbert Witzeman, The Virtue of January. This is the book, Dutch book. English book has the same cover. But welcome, dear people, friends, countrymen, soldiers in arms, to this New Year's reading that I have announced online under the title, "The National Health Policies of the World's Governments Leads to the War of All Against All." But before I go into that, some introductory remarks, let me introduce my bystanders. This, of course, is the image of the representative of humanity by Rudolf Steiner. Above there it says, Michael Sophia in nomine Christi. That is a phrase taken from the book on inner development by Valentin Tomberg, lectures he gave here in Holland, 1983. It was a place where he called for the creation of spiritual knighthood, the community of Michael Sophia in the service of Christ. And that is exactly what the Wilhelm Knights of the Word are going to try to do. This is the text in Dutch. Now, this, of course, is the middle figure of Christ between Lucifer in the heights and Ahriman in the depths. He keeps them apart and redeems them in a certain sense, which is also up to us individually, but the example has been set. And it is this, you might say, also a guardian of the threshold to God's kingdom of love and freedom, in which these opposing forces have no more influence. Below you have the last phase from the meditation stone, foundation stone meditation of Rudolf Steiner. And on the other side here, we have, of course, Wolfram von Eschenbach, the writer, or you might better say dictator, because he couldn't write, he had to dictate everything. The Parsifal and the Wilhelm. And the Wilhelm will be the name of the order of knights that we want to set up, establish on the May 28th this year, which is the day of his death. His day of death is celebrated on May 28th, 812, 814. But according to Werner Groep, in this book, How the Grail Sites Were Found, Wolfram von Eschenbach, as a historian, this Wilhelm, who is the founder of the original House of Orange, must still have been alive in 884, the year that, according to Groeb, the Grail Kingship of Parsifal took place. Above the skies in Arlesheim, repetition of the Star of Bethlehem, the Star of Montserrat. And in this image, you have 5 times this symbol, these 2 opposing P's. It's the Hebrew letter Diresh, and it signifies 2 divine opposing forces that the Grail Knights have to keep in balance. So this keeping in balance of these 2 opposing divine forces is also depicted here. So both of these images are actual figureheads, you might say, for Grail Knights and also friends of God. Those are the 2 columns here, you might say. Behind me here is the inside panel of the triptych by the Dutch painter Jeroen Bosch, the Garden of Heavenly Joys, the divine, the earth and the sub-earth realm of existence. And this middle view has also been called Grail. And above here you have again Michael Sophia in nomine Christi, Wilhelm Ritter of het Woord, in Dutch, Wilhelm Order of Knights of the Word. And here in Dutch, Wereldvredesbond van Oase der Menselijkheid, World Peace Union of Oases of Humanity. That is something that also Rudolf Steiner encouraged young people to do, to start on biological dynamic farmland oases of humanity, they were called later by Herbert Witzemann, who developed this further, but didn't quite realize that this would also be one of the objectives of a Knights of the Word order. That is to introduce here my environment, so to speak. Now I will introduce the text. Text from which I formulated this title was originally published in German. Here, Geldordnung als Bewusstseinsfrage, which means monetary order as a matter of consciousness. It's been translated and I've put it online yesterday so that people that want to look back and study this text can do that, because this text is not easy. It's not easy to, in a certain sense, introduce a real alternative to what's been called the Great Reset by Klaus Schwab and company from the World Economic Forum. It's also been called by the politicians in unison, Build Back Better. And there has been opposition to this, but there has never really, as far as I can see, really a viable alternative. There have been books presenting the threefold social order, but it's not complete, because the threefold social order includes the course by world economy and also includes the constitution of the refounded Anthroposophical Society in 1923, 1 year after this course in economics by Rudolf Steiner. And it's on this course of world economy that these essays by Herbert Witzemann, there are 4 of them, are based, especially the financial aspect. But they go much more beyond what is normally considered financial or monetary thinking. You will see that. Herbert Witzemann is a sort contemporary Doctor Universalis because of the breadth and scope of his thinking. Dr. Novalis was the name given to the great Platonic leader of the school of Chartres in the 13th century, Alanus of Insulis. Now, so much for the introduction to this text. I've given myself an hour and a half, and I'll try to keep within that boundary. Now, this is the announcement that I wrote for this reading and placed online. Again, the title, The National Health Policies of the World's Governments Lead to the War of All Against All. If the present materialistic, inhuman principle of civilization is not replaced by an idealistic human principle of civilization, the war of all against all will break out. This dire warning was sounded by the German philosopher anthroposophist Herbert Witzemann, who lived from 1905 to 1988, already in his essay stemming from 1948, Dynamic Monetary Function, a sensible criterion for distinguishing between positive and negative monetary functions in organizations. From his publication, monetary order as a matter of consciousness, a new financial system requires a new principle of civilization. During the accompanying commentary of the reading of this essay, which since yesterday can be studied online in the English translation, it will be shown that the current principle of civilization does not only underlie the unjust world economy, but also the catastrophic and coercive national health policies of the world's governments. It, in other words, the present principle of civilization, needs therefore to be replaced by the new principle of civilization, namely social organics, or the idea of the threefold social order, the threefold order of the social organism, which was inaugurated and developed in 4 phases by Rudolf Steiner, starting out with his memoranda to the German and Austro-Hungarian governments in 1917 for a just peace to end World War I. And these 4 phases ended with Rudolf Steiner's refounding of the Anthroposophical Society at the Christmas conference in 1923 in Dornach, Switzerland. And I've given a link to there. There's an article called Rudolf Steiner's Idea of Social Organics, a New Constitutional Principle of Civilization, which I delivered in Moscow in 2017, and which can be read to go further into these 4 phases of the history of social organics, or threefolding, not really understood by most threefolders. Now, in order to help realize this, to replace the present principle of civilization with this new principle of civilization, the Wilhelm Order of Knights of the Word, after 10 years of preparation, will finally be founded on May 28th, 2022, in the Elizabeth Frede House in The Hague, in Dutch, and depending on the interest and support, forthcoming in English and German as well. Now, Elizabeth Frede, anthroposophers will know, probably, although not all, was one of the 2 Dutch members of the original council of the original Christmas Conference Foundation, so it's also called the Anthroposophical Society, that was refounded in 1923. And the Anthroposophical Center in The Hague is called after her. Other objectives of this order, male-female, are to make the remaining social organic and social aesthetic writings of Herbert Witzemann, such as The Just Price, World Economy as Social Organics, and Charter of Humanity, the principles of the General Anthroposophic Society, and other authors. I mentioned Vanadine Thomberg, but there are others, contemporary authors, friends of mine, who are writing books. I won't mention their names because I haven't checked it with them, but they will probably come out with us together in this order of knights of the word. And to make these writings available in English, and on the basis of these works develop a project that was also envisaged by Rudolf Steiner during his course on biodynamic agriculture in 1924. It was taken up in 1946 by the Swiss poet Albert Steffen, and successor to Rudolf Steiner as president of the General Anthroposophical Society, and further developed by Herbert Witzemann in 1979 during a conference that he organized every year called Beiträge zur Weltlage, which were views on the world situation, on the critical world situation, to which were all kinds of important thinkers and speakers were invited. Now, this project, already envisaged by Rudolf Steiner, was called Oasis of Humanity. And Herbert Witzman said that there should be formed model, a model, uh, a model project, a model of this, of an oasis of humanity. That will then make a school, will catch on, and then if it spread not only in Germany but in Europe, perhaps the whole world, you know, there's communities on biodynamic farming and studying, promoting spiritual science, anthroposophy, on all its aspects, and then making peace with the earth, with themselves and the other. This can provide a perspective on a world peace. So that's why Herbert Witzman called it in this conference in 1997 World Peace Union. Now, so much for the announcement, and we will now proceed to the text. I will skip my foreword. There's also a preface to the German edition by Guts Rain, one of the students of Herbert Witzman, who founded a biological supermarket in Germany, Alt Natura. He wrote the preface to this essay. Now, this essay was first spoken in 1984 in Darmstadt, Germany, during a conference of economists and scientists called, it was called The Nature of Money and the Current International Money Economy. So, here we go. Dear friends, management is the most creative of all arts. It is the art of using talents in the right way. There's a quotation. This is what Robert McNamara once said. The same one, a minister of defense he was in the cabinet of Kennedy, who took a great part in the Vietnam War, of which he later apologized, and in which I protested. I was in America at that time. This is what McNamara once prophesied, that should development continue at the present pace, Europe would soon end up at the level of a developing nation in relation to the United States. Yeah, this hasn't quite come out. Maybe the other way around. In certain respects, not in the military, economic aspects. This statement sounds good because it attributes a decisive economic and social significance to intellectual and monetary credit for the development of skills. Yet, such a statement says nothing as long as it is unclear what it will be used for, in what civilizational framework it should be placed. I am deeply convinced that the situation in which we find ourselves requires the most comprehensive points of view from us. For it is easy to see, in my opinion, that within probably not too long a period of time, there are of course periods of stagnation and decline with every development, other social groupings will replace the present ruling classes. And this is what is being intended now. You will own nothing and you will be happy. That is the prospect that the new ruling class is offering us. And this was already prophesied in 1984. The decisive question will be what role the individual will be assigned in the community, in the culture to which he belongs. And here another question will take on decisive significance, a question which perhaps first of all may cause some surprise, namely, is money a means of reducing the transaction and information costs, of covering the necessities of life, or, apart from the fact that it can, of course, have this function, should it rather be assigned another task? There's two questions. What will be the role of the individual in the future? Will this role remain the same or become stronger? Because man is an individual and needs to be individually developed in a society with individual freedoms, of ethical individual. This doesn't mean egotism. Or will the role of the individual subside, which is something that we see happening. Freedoms are being taken away, rights are taken away. For the pre-course of what we shall see is the present cult, the cult of the social, not the social, but the physical body, the dance around the golden calf. The other question, is money just a means of transfer, or should it rather be assigned another task? And we will see that Witzman brings up the theme of holy or sacred money and unholy money, which it was previously in previous civilizations. Money was sacred. Now, let us take a cursory look at the way that the human being is nowadays embedded in the environment and social context. For this purpose, this look does not have to reach very deep for the time being. It is immediately apparent that in our political system, there are increasingly sharply profiled interest and self-help groups whose growing influence competes with political ordering measures. Now, what he is talking about actually is what is being called the polarization that is happening, increasing in our society. The competing factions in political parties, but also outside the political parties, other groups that are being confronted by political ordering measures. These groups all have related problems, for each one of them strives to push itself through against the other groups, or to maintain itself more or less as an outsider within them. Foreigners, young people, workers, industrialists, associations are a few important examples of such group formations. They are linked by the common interest of fulfilling demand, with the demand or need being interpreted completely differently for each specific grouping. Nevertheless, it is the need or the demand that is considered necessary to cover a certain life value fulfilling claim. This need or demand is the physical bodily existence, the features of which are presented very differently for each grouping. Demand is the physical bodily existence, the features of which are presented very differently for each grouping. The proper employment of a talent signifies in this network of fulfillment of demand the allocation of a workplace which through participation in covering the need of the other guarantees its own fulfillment of demand, which is felt to be relatively qualified. And the motivation that proceeds from such an employment consists in joining an interest group for the benefits that it guarantees, which within the group is combined with essentially aligned interests, but with respect to the groups among themselves comes up against far-reaching opposing interests, polarization. Characteristic of this employment and this striving to be the object of the employment procedure is that labor sharing policies in turn, that the labor sharing process in turn provides a quid pro quo for its own needs. Now, if one wonders how such a system can function that contains so many inner tensions, one can immediately see that it would have to collapse through its internal centrifugal forces if it were not held together by the general recognition of a supreme good. Rudolf Steiner has once said that every community that is not held together by a cult must in time perish. The cult is the esteem, preservation, and increase of the highest good or goods recognized by it, which weaves the social binding, the social cement. It is hardly possible to mistake what kind of cult and its highest good holds together the civilization of our time. It is the attribution of the high or highest esteem to the physical value of life and the nurturing of physical existence, of the comforts it provides, and, in case of need, securing its survival. It is the dance around the golden calf of the physical body, not the sanctification of its beauty and wisdom and the capacity for devotion disposed in it, but of its ponderable existence and biological function. Now, when I was translating these sentences, the cult of the physical body, the highest that we in our civilization look up to, its biological function, then I was reminded this is exactly what the underlying motivation is for the measures that are being taken to so-called combat this pandemic. Because it concerns the government is concerned about the preservation of the national physical health, the physical bodies of its citizens, and is not taking into account the psychological and the spiritual aspects of the human being. That will become now clearer in the course of this essay. The cult of the body is the expression of the religion that is to the highest possible extent gripping humanity today. This religion is materialism, the belief or superstition that the material is the one and only reality. This belief results in a basic certain mood, which of course often retreats deep into the subconscious. This is the sense of not feeling at home in the inhumanity of this material world. This feeling of not belonging is one of the root causes of the tendency to seek protection in groups, which withdraws even further into the protective cover of physical corporeality. Thus arises the protection-granting cult of physical corporeality, which is actually a cult of inhumanity. For when the only real thing about us in the perishable, carnal body, then our soul spiritual experiences, that is, everything of which we become conscious of us as human beings, are mere fantasy. The social groups are the various cultic forms of materialistic belief in which the body cult is celebrated. Yet, this is still the expression of an agreement that for the time being prevents the war of all against all, since all have an interest in bodily protection. Now, of course, he didn't say it here, but this not feeling at home in this materialistic world also causes physiological illnesses, drugs, violence. And this is also being the effect of many of these measures that are being taken against the corona pandemic. And there are many people that are saying the cure is worse than the illness. Also because apparently medicaments that can cure this corona pandemic are being under depressed. It's only vaccination. No. But it is also clear that the stimuli and anesthetics of the materialistic cults are not sufficient to continue deceiving its participants in the long run about its meaninglessness. This results in the upsurge of social unrest on the part of the new social groups or cult forms. This meaninglessness, this sense of what is life about, that it has no sense. That the Big Bang started eons ago and will end in a death, a heat death. And this is also turning very many people down, taking them to, as I said, into all in a unhealthy avenues. Now there's another aspect, a more positive one. Now I would like to introduce another point of view. And this is again a saying of Rudolf Steiner. In his book Theosophy, we read the statement, man is a thought being. Man is therefore not a being like minerals, plants, and animals, arises from natural processes, at least not for the actual human part of his being, his spiritual part. He is not, like the creatures of nature, a being that derives the content of his being from the general processes of the environment to which he belongs. Man is a thought being, thus a being who must and can shape his being himself or herself in an individual manner. For his thoughts, man must and can produce himself. Man must and can produce his thoughts. They don't come easy by themselves. He must produce them, bring them into consciousness. Thus his being is his task. The being of the human being is his task. He is his own producer. Man is his own producer. The human is his own producer. This self-production is connected with another production, namely that of reality. The latter is at the same time self-production. Man emerges as a self from his production process of the world. This is caused and made possible by the way he is physically organized. Now, this will be elaborated on a little bit more in the following text, but not to the extent that it is really, what can I say, completely obvious. For that you have to go to one of the master works of Witzmann, namely his commentary, his book on the philosophy of freedom, which I have almost finished translating. It's also on internet or online. Title is Philosophy of Freedom as a Basis for Artistic Creation. If you Google that, you will get to it. It's about 200 pages. And this is an incredible, clarifying, unique insight into the content and structure of this book by Rudolf Steiner, which he said will survive him for 2,000 years. Now, man as a thought being, a different cult form emerges from this than the currently dominant body cult. The latter, the body cult, is a cult of inhumanity, which is now contrasted with the cult in which man activates and experiences himself as a thought being, the actual cult of humanity. This is a production cult, while the body cult is a consumption cult. What I call cult, and indeed production cult, is nothing but the development of a new principle of civilization. That is the new principle of civilization that Herbert Witzmann in other texts has called social organics. Another word for the idea of the threefold social order. But here it's more directed towards the consciousness aspect of it. The philosophical, anthroposophical aspect of it. This production cult. It is that change of consciousness which many recognize and also call out. For example, the German President Karl Friedrich von Weizsäcker called that out. That was during the time of that it was spoken in the 80s. That it is the only way out of our state of emergency, out of our crisis situation. A change of consciousness. The materialistic cult of behavior in our civilization indoctrinates people to use all their faculties to create the most favorable consumption conditions for their physical prosperity. And this is the same whether it's called a new world order or the Great Reset. It's the same old principle of civilization, and even leads further down into the materialistic way of behavior and thinking. The idealistic cult of behavior, on the other hand, directs the use of human faculties towards something else. This is precisely in the direction of self-production, i.e., in other words, the physiological, ecological, economic, and social conditions that give room for the best development of one's spiritual faculties. In other words, in the direction of a free educational system. Whereas the materialistic cult chains man's spiritual faculties to his physical organism, the idealistic cult frees man from it and makes possible his free development in the sense of his actual task. This brings about not only a completely new attitude to life as compared to the present, but also a completely changed social climate, and yes, even a changed natural climate. And here you have a completely different way of approaching climate change, which is usually only approached by material things, less carbon dioxide. But the spiritual attitude of consciousness is thereby hardly considered. Yet this change of consciousness can also cause a change in the natural climate. I seem to have strayed from my theme, which was to deal with the financial system and the effects of money. But on the contrary, I wanted to create the condition enabling one to clarify in what way the civilizational principle of community influences the monetary order, and vice versa, the monetary order influences the civilizational principle, and how from this a possibility arises to distinguish favorable and unfavorable effects. In order to clarify this in a way that seems to be desirable, I must, however, include a further thought in my remarks. As for the time being, he goes further in this social view of how we are embedded in our environment, and only later he goes into the economic aspects, but then ends with a future vision of an oasis of humanity. But he goes on to now to deepen this aspect of this body cult. The body cult cultivates the preservation of the body and the increase of its comforts. However, it leads to the opposite of what it is intended in, namely to bodily destruction and ecological catastrophe. But it gets even worse. But these are in comparison to the radical annihilation effect proceeding from body worship, annihilation effects of a lesser kind. For the absolute, definitive destruction is the destruction of the meaning of corporeality and embodiment. The meaning of corporeality and embodiment, the destruction thereof. After all, the meaning of the physiological basis of our existence is to be the basis of our freedom, for our idealistic self-production. When our bodily existence is elevated to the rank of chaining our spiritual existence to the concentric employment of skills, rather than making it free, it is robbed of its meaning. The bodily existence is robbed of its meaning. It is only put in the concentric employment of skills, and not to make it free, to make us free human beings. This destruction of its meaning is the most radical form of bodily destruction, and therefore human destruction. The body cult must therefore lead to existential human destruction, which is far more fearsome than the material one. And now comes actually the climax of this whole treatise, this whole essay. Listen. By entangling all its participants in a process in which each one takes part in the destruction of the meaning of the human body, and thus of humanity in general, the body cult celebrates the war of all against all. I believe that today everyone must ask himself whether he or she wants to participate in the preparation of that war, or rather in the preparation of such measures that can prevent it. Now, this existential question is what motivated a few of us to try to found such a Knight of the Words order, an order of Knights of the Words, exactly to take up this question, to prevent this impending war of all against all, by articles such as this, only one of them, many others. From here, an aspect of money becomes apparent to which I attach great significance. Money as a reference order and means of supplying needs of all kinds undoubtedly has a transfer function. The only question is how this transfer function is qualified. It is qualified by the normative principle of civilization and qualifies it in reverse. Money is thus the form of expression of the prevailing cult, the expression for what highest value serves the cooperation of a community. This is actually its meaning. This is the meaning of money, not that of making the supply of demand cheaper. In this sense, it was once holy and is still basically holy, or rather unholy today. Unholy money is money that is in the service of the materialistic cult of destruction. Sacred or holy money is money that serves the idealistic cult of self-production, human self-production. Now this is the end of the social or sociological view that he has done. And now goes on to the more economic aspects, financial aspects. We may now ask, what kinds of money in this sense are holy or unholy, destructive or creative? I am now not making a case for enumerating or characterizing all the metamorphoses in which money can appear. I am merely picking out a few that seem to me to be of special significance. To this end, I first remind you again what has already been mentioned. Man, as a thought being, is a self-producing being who in the cognitive production of his world produces himself or herself. I'm not making too much attention to gender here. I prefer to use the word man, the capital letter. It is therefore an expressive being. Man is therefore an expressive being that expresses himself in his world. As a physical being, man is a being subject to impressions, completely determined by the action of his environment. thus a being that in order to secure its existence must strive to seize these impressions, to take possession of them. Expressing oneself creatively and seizing impressions are thus opposed to each other, are contrasted to each other. Thus, destruction money as the character of seizure money, and creation money as the character of expression money. Now, with these points of view in mind, let us first consider the money created by so-called real estate credit, thus money created by the granting of credit on unprocessed land. This is typical seizure money, with the aim of obtaining means of subsistence by seizing natural resources. It is typical seizure money because unchanged natural resources lack any expressive content. This money, therefore, not only has no expressive value, but no value at all, because its mode of creation cannot contribute to human physical or spiritual existence. As a false value, it thus distorts the overall balance of the economy. Moreover, it represents the bodily related principle of civilization and is therefore unholy money, destruction money, that contributes to the preparation of the war of all against all. Thus, mortgage money is a real cult symbol. It should be counterbalanced by a real symbol of the cult of humanity. This, in contrast to the lust for seizure, could extend gratitude towards the earth. For we owe the earth the greatest debt of gratitude, because as the mother of all the processes of nature, she gives us our bodies, and thus the physiological basis for our freedom. This gratitude should leave its mark on our dealings with the earth, her substances, her forces, and her creatures. It should determine not only our technology and the way in which we cultivate the earth, but first and foremost our mindset, which should also find its expression in feasts, such as the Feast of Michael, the 29th of September. This mindset would have just as important a healing effect on the seriously diseased earth as certain agriculture and ecological measures. The human capacity for expression could be used here in a particularly effective way. Now another type of money. Let us take wage money as the second topic of our considerations. This is also paid out for a pseudo-value, a false value. Admittedly, every performance, every work output also results in a change in the performer, in the worker. See, quotation, the shaper forms himself. A quote by Hegel, the philosopher Hegel. Der Bildende bildet zichself. The one that is shaping things also shapes himself. It casts back on the active party. However, this change remains attached to the personality and cannot be sold as a commodity. Neither does it have to be, because it is directly operative in the encounter exchange and works free of charge, between brackets, business environment. The product or partially finished products, semi-finished product, could, however, be paid for. It would have to be valued according to the basic need formula. That is not a wage table either, since in an economy based on full division of labor, the product is not sold either, but passed into the total economic process. The basic formula then only has a value determining fact function. Wage money thus amounts to a self-perpetuating seizure. In addition to excessive rationalization, it is a root cause of unemployment. In a completely labor-sharing economy, the work performance is donated, given away, and thus passes into the total value-creating process along with its result, and the need of the performer, the worker, according to collective and individual criteria, is given back. This is a formulation of the social main law formulated by Rudolf Steiner, that the more the worker donates his work output to the society, and society takes care of his needs, in other words, the more give and take there is, the more well-being there is. Shortly formulated, the more egotism, the more trouble, the more pain, the more altruism, the more well-being. Only in this way is it possible that the creation and distribution of surplus value becomes absorbed in the process and flows from it, that the highest value creation is guaranteed, not as quantitative value maximization, but as the creation of expression values. These are the only ones that are holy. The self-sufficient retention of surplus value is an expression of weakness and therefore unholy and unhealthy. Now I'm reminded of a saying by Walter Johannes Stein, who wrote this book on the 9th century. The 9th century, world history in the light of the Holy Grail. I haven't been able to give a source, but I'm sure it's valid. He said that the impulse of the Grail in the 20th century consists in transforming an economy, a world economy based on greed and egotism, to an economy based on altruism and brotherhood, love for one's fellow man. Now, if this is the Grail impulse of the 20th century, it is still so in the 21st. And in this sense, you can say that Herbert Witzman is a Grail disciple, a Grail knight, a knight of the word, because that's exactly what he's doing here. He's transforming the financial aspects, monetary aspects of the economy from an unholy to a holy one. It warrants the highest thanks, warrants the highest respect for what has been done here. And at the same time, one can be, how can I say it, somewhat dismayed that it's taken so long for this to enter the English-speaking world, especially the American-speaking world. But there, in the economy, the money aspects are so important, the materialistic impulse. But the healthy influence, the way to cure it, the curative influences are coming from Europe, are coming from people such as Herbert Witzmann, who was an industrialist, leader of the social science section at the Goetheanum, leader of the youth section until he was, based on an disagreement on the way to publish and further the work of Rudolf Steiner, he was, through a majority decision of his colleagues in the council, he was removed from the council, removed from the Goetheanum, and had to start all over again, develop a new infrastructure. And these internal quibbles, these internal problems have led to it taking so long for this now to finally come out into the open in English. 84 to 22. How many years is that? 22 and 16. 38 years it took. And still very, very actual. Now these are the holy aspects, the holy types of money. The self-sufficient retention of surplus value is an expression of weakness and therefore unholy and unhealthy. Self-sufficiency, Rudolf Steiner says, Course in World Economy, is only valid for the farmer, not for an economy in which there's labor sharing, division of labor, because division of labor makes products cheaper. Now this applies to an even greater extent to speculative money created by stray capital. The nominal value thus created are expressionless pseudo-values, false values, fake values that are not related to expressive value creation. Instead of speculation money, there should be gift money to the free spiritual or cultural life. Such an endowment can be considered true speculation. The hallmark of speculation being a return that is disproportionately large in relation to the stake. Through an endowment to the free spiritual life, the highest speculative gains can arise. For a comparatively small endowment to a bearer of the free spirit can enable him or her to perform unusual feats. The speculative gains accrue not to a single person, but to the whole community. The expression value can be exceptionally great. Trust money is involved here. Let's talk about interest. The interest gained, the income gained as interest from a constant nominal amount is impossible. If one conceives of money in strict correlation with its value coverage by goods, as its value devalues, its money value must also devalue. Moreover, saving is also not an achievement worthy of reward. Instead, there could be credits on future performance. Those credits create an enhanced ability to cover earlier needs that is amortized by the renunciation of need to know at a later date. Waiving fulfillment of demand instead of saving, in contrast to unholy hoarding, as a place within the functional context of an expressive total event. Now is a summarizing of these money sorts. Mortgage money, wage money, speculation and interest money are therefore unholy types of money, which are to be counterbalanced by expressive, holy types of work and money, namely thanksgiving, performance-focused gifts, free gift speculation, in the sense of trust money you refer to here, and the renunciation of fulfillment of demand in order to amortize a credit for the fulfillment of demand. Therefore, from the point of view of the cult of ideas and the sacred effects proceeding from it, only such means of transfer can assume a real healing monetary function that remain in constant correlation with abstract expressive creation. They cannot therefore be tied to static correlations. These human expressive creations must undergo a change for two main reasons. One, it lies in the nature of human expressive creation that in the process thereof, as has been indicated here, man is changed. That thus also the individual, as well as the epochal style of expression, undergoes a development, leaving older, obsolete forms of expression behind. 2. No material medium can maintain its level of expression in the long run. It decays. The expression that is imprinted is all the more permanent, all the more stable, the less the material nature of the medium is absorbed during the transfer of the expressive value by the recipient. Works of art, therefore, are therefore all the more stable in their expressive value, the more matter by them is destroyed through the form. Of all value creation, works of art are therefore the most stable in expression and thus in value. Their stability of value can as a result enter into a contrast with their temporary validity. Sacred holy money must therefore be expression money, dynamized money. A healthful, peaceful monetary order must be dynamized monetary order. Now these are, as I said, the more financial, economic considerations, which are not easy to understand, and I refer to the text online that you can find. But if you go to monetary order, monetary-order.blogspot.nl, you will get to this text. And it should be hopefully also discussed on internet, in my institute, in the Goetheanum even, because the Goetheanum has said that it wants to rehabilitate the work of Herbert Witzeman. But I haven't seen much of it lately. Now we come to the last 1.5 pages, and we still haven't reached the hour and a half. I hope you stayed with me. I admit it's not easy, but only if you got the impression that there is something important here being said. I think my reading has succeeded in its aims. Now, I have given this section a subtitle, Viewpoints Towards a Sacred Monetary Order and Oasis of Humanity. Thus, whoever would like to do something that can stop the decay of our earth and the decline of our world may adopt the most broad-minded, grandiose points of view. These are the viewpoints that can lead to the emergence of the featured sacred monetary order. This is the real new economic order, financial aspect of it in any case. This is the real great reset. This is the not build back better, but build in the future better. Build the future better. These are the viewpoints that can lead to the emergence of the featured sacred money order. These are thanksgiving to the earth in a festive, serious mood, performance-focused gifts to a society organized exclusively according to criteria of expression, free gift speculation according to a trust that places all its hopes only in individual originality and the renunciation of the fulfillment of demand, with a view in strengthening fulfillment of demand. These are both the technical and emotive characteristics of a dynamized monetary order. In oases of humanity, they could be cultivated as models of new community forms in view of the emergence of new social groupings that will probably soon replace the older ones. Again, this prophetic view in the future. New groupings that are being thrust upon us, you might say, of what can arise today. Only oases of the cult of expression are likely to remain. It is, in other words, no use to only demonstrate against what is being directed our way. It is necessary to demonstrate, yes, but it's more necessary not to demonstrate, but to be positive, to create these oases of humanity based on these and other writings of Herbert Witzman and spiritual brothers in arms. Now, I know there is nothing more obvious than to label thoughts of this kind that I have allowed myself to express as utopian. If they were not so in relation to the current situation, they would be worth nothing. For these are peacemaking thoughts. Against them stand thoughts that unconsciously and sometimes also consciously bring closer the war of all against all, with all the brutality of the power behind them. And since we are no longer far from Christmas, because this was being said just before Christmas, but now we have just had Christmas. A statement by Rudolf Steiner on December 21st, 1916 in Basel, Switzerland, comes to mind when one could still cherish the hope that the worst would not happen. The war could still come out in a neutral sense and not in a complete defeat of Germany, which brought on the Second World War, all these reparations. Since we are again in the run-up to Christmas, or since we have just had Christmas, since we are again after Christmas on the threshold of the worst of tidings, but also in a situation which still leaves room for hope, should we decide to act decisively, which hasn't happened since this is has been said, and that makes it even more difficult now, but that's still possible. Rudolf Steiner's words are as valid and shocking as they were then. Now these are the words of Rudolf Steiner. It must cut deep in the heart that we live in a time in which the longing by people for peace is being bellowed against. And then there's a remark by Witzeman, this roar comes not only from the threat of war, but much more from the homage paid to the unholy cult, as I tried to make clear. Now, Rudolf Steiner, today, while we are not yet facing the very worst, let us cherish the hope that souls may come to repentance, and that instead of that bellowing against the desire for peace, a Christian feeling, a will for peace may come. Otherwise, perhaps not those who are present governing in Europe, but will be those who will one day avenge from Europe, from Asia, that roaring against the yearning for peace, who will have to proclaim to mankind on the ruins of European spiritual life, Christianity and the mystery of Golgotha. Because instead of the people governing Europe now or then, the people from Asia will have to avenge this turning down, this yearning for peace, and will have to proclaim on the what does he says on the ruins of European spiritual life, Christianity and the mystery of Golgotha. That's how it ends. Now, let me just end by saying this, that Abbot Witzeman ended with a quotation by Rudolf Steiner on the mystery of Golgotha, proclaiming the mystery of Golgotha. Now, as a aftermath, continuation of this text by Abbot Witzeman, I will, on the 6th of January, I've already announced it online, publish as a study piece of work the first essay from this booklet by Valentin Tomberg, called, in English it would be, The Onset of the Sixth Cultural Period. The Sixth Cultural Period, which is the succession of the fifth present cultural period, which is to begin in a few thousand years, but Rudolf Steiner has said it will have to be prepared already by a number of people, this new cultural sixth period in which true Christianity will take hold. And I have made a point that Rudolf Steiner, with the Christmas Foundation, took a measure to present the organizational form for this new Christianity in the so-called 15 statutes that were unanimously endorsed at the Christmas Foundation, but of which an astute student of Abbot Witzeman, who is now running the seminar that Witzeman started after he was booted out, you might say, unrespectfully, from the Goethe in Basel, the Center for Cognitional Science and Social Aesthetics, has written a trilogy on the activity of Abbot Witzeman, in the Vorstand, in the council from 1963 to his death in 1988. Hasn't been translated, but I've translated an excursion from it called the gradual disappearance, the gradual disappearing of the social aesthetic qualifications of the Anthroposophical Society, meaning that from these 15 statutes, 9 have been annulled, misunderstood, put out of action. And this is also one of the motives for founding such a Wilhelm Order of Knights of the Word, that at least in Holland, there is an organization, a group, a community of spirits, determined spirits, that have in their flag, in their goal, the furthering and protection of the new Christianity. The new Christianity that will only take hold in the 6th cultural period, but has to be prepared now. And one of the people that prepared that was Valentin Tomberg, even though people may disagree with that. I have translated in the past couple of days, from the beginning of the holy period, from the 24th of December, the first essay, which is called The Mystery of Golgotha, exactly where Witzmann ends with Rudolf Steiner. It has 5 sections, parts. The Mystery of Golgotha is the title, but the first section is the crucifixion in the light of the philosophy of freedom. So the same kind of method that Herbert Witzmann uses in most of his works, not so much in this, but you can also find it there. Man as a self-producing being, man as somebody who has to produce his own being, in which he then is produced himself by the world, an intuitive exchange of being. Then the second section, the mystery of Golgotha and heaven. 3, the mystery of Golgotha and the earth. Mystery of Golgotha and humanity. And 5, the World Rose Cross. Now, that I hope to put online on the 6th of January, 3 Kings. It's also the celebration of Christmas in the Orthodox world, in the Eastern Church, and also in Dutch. And then, as I already announced earlier this morning, because it's 6:30 exactly, almost here, at 11 o'clock I held this reading in Dutch. I announced at the end that I will be continuing my readings of the 13-part introduction by Herbert Witzmann to the book Christianity as Mystical Fact and the Mysteries of Antiquity, on the 17th of January, but no longer in The Hague, in the Elizabeth Vrede Center, but here in the library of the Wilhelm Institute. I will start commenting and reading the 5th chapter of this introduction by Herbert Witzmann, and also report on the preparations for this founding of the Wilhelm Ritter Order of Knights of the Word on the 28th of May. Now with that, I will end this reading. I thank those who have been watching this until the end. I wish everyone a productive, creative, happy New Year, and hope that my reading will have some effects on the state of the world.